Now we are opening the floor for questions. Feel free to ask questions. Bilal, you're the first one.
I have a question for Dr. Liu. Talk a little bit about the foreign reserves that China has. You mentioned that as being a dilemma for monetary policy. I'm curious if it's really a dilemma for the Chinese government or is it more a dilemma for the U.S. government? Because obviously putting that out on the open market, exchanging that for cash for RMBs is going to create, as you mentioned, surplus liquidity. But I would envision, and the panel may answer that as well, I would envision that would probably be attractive for the U.S. manufacturing companies if the dollar does go down. Does that create an export opportunity for U.S. firms?
Okay, it's a question. Actually, today's topic is, for me, it's a very big topic. I don't have much time to elaborate every issues. Actually, I think for the dilemma, I think it's both for China and the United States. For China, we don't want to accumulate a very huge foreign reserve. We are very worried about the foreign reserves value, especially we have about 70% of foreign reserve accountable U.S. dollar or U.S. Treasury bonds, or some bonds from the French name and the foreign name. So for Chinese government, we don't want to do so. It's a dilemma for the United States because U.S. dollar is the number one foreign the international currency in the world. It is the unit for the exchange of goods in the international society. It is also a unit to evaluate other assets price. For United States, if many countries accumulate a very huge foreign reserve, that means for United States have to stay a very huge trade deficit, because U.S. government don't need foreign currency as reserve. Dollar is the reserve. So it's a very huge problem. It is called the global economic imbalance. To resolve this problem, I think both United States government and China government need to do work to adjust their economic structure. For China, we need to consume more. We need to start up our domestic demand. We need to let many people to consume more goods from outside China. Also consume many goods in domestic to make up for the gap those caused by the actual export sector reduced in China. For the United States, they need to save more money and reduce the consumption. But this problem cannot be resolved in a short run. It needs a long run. It involves with the economic structure adjustment. So I think it needs more time.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next question, Professor Gerstenfeld.
Hi, my name is Professor Arthur Gerstenfeld, and I congratulate you on this fine conference. I have about 6 questions, but I'll boil it down to 1 or 2.
Are you going to ask all the questions on behalf of the audience here?
And I'll keep the time small. But one that we struggle with is WPI, and one that I'd be interested in any of the panelists' comments about, is this question of linking technology and management. In China, I've been listening to you describe a lot of the changes taking place technically and the amazing growth that's been happening. Obviously, you have to have technical skills for that growth and managerial skills. How do you link technology and management? And to be a little bit more specific, do you have technical people who learn a lot about economics and managerial issues, or do you have management people that learn about technology?
So who would like to take on the first to answer the question? How about Selena?
It's a very good question. It's actually hard to answer. The only thing I can think about is that China does realize such a problem. They are advanced in terms of using their education in terms of and emphasize science and technologies, but they are weak in terms of management. Managerial strategies, and many U.S. companies that do business in China have realized such a problem, and it's difficult to find people, management level people in China. It's very difficult to find technical people in China. And I have never worked in the China government, but I know so I can't know their strategy to tackle this problem, but I do know the more I see a trend of the collaboration between universities from China and here in Massachusetts. They are running, a lot of universities running CEO training and also middle levels of management trainings in collaboration with the universities in China as well as in the United States. This is a very hot business model actually going on currently.
Okay, great. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Well, I was just thinking,
Turn it on.
I should turn it on. Well, I was just thinking, it depends on who the problems are directed at. I think for U.S. multinationals in China, for investors, again, it goes to the point that this is very, in terms of competing right now for talent, managerial talent at a premium. It's very difficult to obtain and develop. I mean, the one thing that multinationals won't have, or those investors have, over the domestic competition, they can leverage their global networks to say, we're going to bring you to Germany, or we'll bring you to the U.S., and we'll commit to you in that way, develop you in that way. On the China side, the Chinese domestic companies, I would say, as you mentioned, technical strengths are very much there. On the managerial side, it's a little bit more difficult. I mean, they tend not to kind of refer to sort of the deep bench, who's got a deep bench. I don't think on the managerial side, I mean, very generally speaking, you've got some very, very, particularly, it's a private sector company, you've got the owner, the CEO, you've got a couple people around him, not a whole lot of depth in the bench, things like cross-border investing, things like that. So it depends on the company that you're referring to, but just some thoughts.
Ken, you mentioned people problems in your talk. Do you have anything to add?
I think that for most of the mid-market companies, as Chris related to, a deep bench. Well, a deep bench means that basically you can't afford to have a group of specialists that can't share and communicate amongst each other. And think you probably have to have some multi-specialists, people that are technically competent to approach a problem with a technical approach, as well as a general approach in terms of what is the business aspect of that, so you can prioritize which problems to solve. I think the 8 boards across the back are a perfect example of the blending of technical competence with a real business problem that needed to be solved. And I think that the more generalization that you can have crossing the technical disciplines with the managerial disciplines, the better the outcomes are going to be in the companies that they're serving.
Okay. Professor Gerstenfeld, could you ask your other 5 questions during lunch break? Is that okay? All right. Other questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, John Bush. I run a small trading company. I import from China, which means I buy in renminbi and I sell to customers in dollars. Recently, it has been quite a bit of press about, even as far as calling China a currency manipulator. And I think there's probably a couple of very interesting and different perspectives on the panel. So I'd like to know what you think about the renminbi currency and China's control or manipulation, if you like that word, of its currency. My feeling on it is to send a message to Washington: careful what you ask for. If we force it to flow, we're going to force some changes on our selves as consumers in the form of inflation and increased prices. But that's my opinion. I'd like to hear yours.
Quickly, I think you want to be careful what you ask for.
I definitely agree there. I mean, I would say that, just to very frankly speaking, I think that this summer we're going to see a resumption of appreciation. I think that's my feeling. Is that there's a lack of consensus within the Chinese government. You've got more government very concerned about China's exporters. You've got, basically, it's the exporters in the agricultural sector that are worried about the farm being allowed to appreciate before they feel that they're ready for it to happen. But I think that obviously when we postponed that report that was supposed to come out in the middle of last month, I think that it was in the works. There needs to be sufficient distance between President Bush's visit to Washington. The Chinese are regularly scheduled. Twice a year they meet to consider these things. The next one was in July. I would look for appreciation. Going on a limb, I would say we're looking at 10 to 50% appreciation by year's end. Just my opinion.
Okay. More questions?
Yes.
Who has the microphone? Yeah. Mr. Howard Rice. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? I have a company which is currently, finally after 15 years trying, exporting successfully to China. And one of the things I was going to ask about the 5 mistakes is, were you referring to a company which was going to set up manufacturing facilities in China, or were you referring to a company which would export to China? Because we found there are 2 different sets of problems, and ultimately decided that the cost of putting together and getting a woofie was very, very too much, and that we needed to export essentially woofie. The next thing we encountered was the fact that we had to tailor our products for the Chinese market. And the biggest mistake we found in talking with people from around here is that those who had failed did not, in effect, adjust both their product and the way they sold it to the Chinese market. And there's where I think a lot of small companies could use some help. I don't know how they get it, but we had to get it through AMT, which is the Association of Manufacturing Technologies, which enabled us to hire a full-time person who could be there. But what do you do if you don't have that access? We found that you could not succeed just using commission agents. How do you deal with that situation?
I'll take that. I think this afternoon you're going to hear some great examples well. I think you're right, that whether you want to export into that market or whether you want to source in that market, you have to be very, very specific and careful and well prepared, both understanding not just what it is you do, but what it is that will be done for you over there. If you're trying to sell over there, you certainly have to understand the cultural aspects of how your product will be received. If you're wanting to manufacture over there, you need to understand the producing cultures that would be supporting how you receive that product. So I think you're very right, Howard. And I think this afternoon there are some terrific examples.
One of the things that we found is that when we were going through agents who were purely commission people, it was hopeless. And we finally hired someone full-time who became a part of our team. And it was only after we got to that point that we could really go forward and feel comfortable that the data we got was real and honest. And the other thing that we found is that dealing with privately held companies and government-owned companies is vastly different. And you didn't talk about that at all, but somehow you have to learn how to deal with that. And one of the big mistakes is trying to treat both of them the same.
Okay, thank you, Professor Pu, all the way from China.
My name is Han Song Pu. I'm a visiting professor here from Hangzhou Yangtze University. I'm leaving for Hangzhou tomorrow. And my question is, now, we are talking about foreign direct investment in China. Do you see any foreign direct investment opportunity in Massachusetts for companies in China, particularly for those small, mid-sized companies in China coming here to do the business, to do investment? Do you see any opportunities?
Yeah, I just mentioned in my presentation that we do see a trend of opportunities from China to Massachusetts, especially in the area of education, biotech, and medical device. And before I mentioned my presentation, which is the Chinese Education Network Company. There is a biotech company. Previously, biotech company over here, they all outsourced to China. But now China, the sector is growing up. So we wanted to leverage the opportunities in Massachusetts. So they almost had to set up their operations over here to collaborate with their partners over here. So we do see a trend of that. The biggest Chinese medical device company, Maidui, opened their shops over here, and we can partner. It's called Beach Last year. Last year, we had their operation over here as well, but planning to expand it to the R&D service as well. And the fishery industry company I mentioned is the Tangzidao company in Massachusetts. We are the top scallop producers in the nation as well as in the world. So we all come here to work with local companies here. So we can see a trade off for foreign companies interest to come to work with us.
More questions? Yes, this gentleman is right here.
Hi, my name is Rich Schneider. I have a question for both guys, two-part question. One is, if you were setting up a new company in China, you want to establish operations in a sense, a manufacturing company, would you advise them to start up in a more established area like Shenzhen or in Shanghai, understanding that those areas are now pretty highly developed and it's much more competitive for labor? Or would you advise them to go to one of the emerging areas, maybe deeper into the interior of China? And then the second part of the question is, where do you think those emerging provinces, cities are? Where do you think are the next areas where there's great opportunities for manufacturing?
I think that you need to do both. You need to, when you go, it would seem to me that I would make sure that you're speaking with zone officials out in places like Changsha, and Hunan, or it depends again on your supply chain. Lots of factors that are going to come into play. But I would absolutely make sure that when you go and speak with them, that you look at some of these inland places, because I was just talking before during the break. I mean, 5 years ago, what we talked about in terms of the trade-offs we'll be making in terms of transportation costs, logistics, all these sorts of things, that's changed absolutely in 5 years. It'll change again in 5 years. So your ability to move product in and out of the places, inland, the quality of the human resources that you're going to find, I think that's going to be, depending on a lot of factors, but it would seem to me that you would certainly want to look. And I would say one place would be to look further up the Yangtze River Valley. There are places where the Chinese are now rolling out policies, industrial migration policies, where they're working with, right now, mostly domestic manufacturers to relocate some of these places inland, like Anhui province, which is large and basically one province back in from Jiangsu, not far from Shanghai. And you're going to find, I think, a lot of very attractive incentives there. You're going to find that the regions are very well plugged in from the transportation network standpoint. So I would say both. You look at both. It really depends on the specific situation.
The only thing I would add is that don't put the pressure on making a decision quickly. Just be able to go over and make a couple of trips to just kind of check out the resources in depth, in place, not from the cities, but from the areas where we think we may be located. And product-specific items, something that are fairly easy, and that's what I think we can help as well with the research.
One thing I'd like to add to it is there's some new strategies that companies over here. They set up a rep office in the first tier city and then set up their manufacturing in the second tier city. So they could cover the public relations as well as the current competition as well.
Okay, great. We have time for one more question from the lady at the back.
Okay. Hello everyone. I actually have several questions, but yeah, I'll ask one first. About locals, like for example, when in China, they speak Chinese, they have they have very complex culture, and it's very different. So I want to ask a question about what the point do you think can make your company stand out? Like instead of Chinese company, because there are like a bunch of Chinese company in China. So which point can make your company really stand out as a foreigner? Yeah. You got it?
One company in China?
Yeah, like when you invest a company in China, so what can really make you stand out?
I think you have innovative technologies that will really set you apart.
Yeah, actually, it's one of my concern because maybe you set a company in China tomorrow. There's another company going to copy the stuff. Yeah,
there are certain strategies. You try to protect your intellectual property. Many companies they keep their core technologies over here. So they do the final assembly here, whereas they do all the parts in China, and they do the rest of the work country, and they ship the things back here and assemble here, and sell it back to the
Thank you. And another question will be we're more concerned about the technology, but what do you guys think about the other industry? Because when we think about China, the first one we think about the low cost, it's made in China part. But the other parts, because of the large population, so they have more customer in China. So what do you guys think about the other industry in China?
Well, I think it's much easier to find industries where you might not want to invest in, it is to say which ones are the ones that you want to invest in. And most of the ones that you would not want to invest in are ones where, for whatever reasons, the Chinese have determined they they want to restrict foreign investment. So it's not so much even, it's kind of an imposed constraint. And then going back to your first question, I would just say, in addition to technology, sure, bringing technology to China, there are lots of problems there. Companies really need to think about what it is they bring with them, where they bring it, et cetera. But I mean, to me, at a higher level, you can distinguish yourself just by demonstrating a long-term commitment to China, or I think a long-term commitment to China, per se. And that could be to investing in human resources, bringing talent forward, bringing them overseas to train, as I mentioned earlier. There are lots of ways to demonstrate that don't necessarily put your company at an IP risk, but nonetheless, demonstrate to many people, at the local level, that you're not there to sort of quick buck, you're there to grow with them. And that's how you really, I think you start there, you can find ways to stand out.
I think the other thing is brand power. If you have an established competency in certain things, for instance, opening and shutting actuating devices, one of the things you can do is take early product which is no longer good in the U.S. market, because our attempt is always to take the cost of labor out of it, whereas the Chinese market is not necessarily driven by the same cost factors. They would take a product that may be 10 years old. If that were updated with current technology, without all the automation, all the features, just a plain, ordinary, vanilla one that sold 10 years ago, you may have a very good success in taking that kind of a product in there, and your brand would carry you, or your confidence would carry you and put it in, because it's what's applicable to that need there now, as opposed to the U.S. need next year.
I want to echo this point because I have two slides I didn't bring with me. You can look it up at the U.S. Commercial Service website. We did a research on all the U.S. companies in China. So in the 5 years, 10 years span, we have seen that U.S. companies are winning in China. They really do profit there. So if you are ready to expand to China, you really have to look at a long-term strategy.
Okay, I'm sure you still have questions, but the panelists will be around during the lunch break, so feel free to talk to them during the lunch break.